that it makes a difference in learning. I mean, you know, we've been doing this long enough. We should be able to see some evidence of whether it's helping kids. It's not, she's saying. It's actually not helping them learn. So who is benefiting from the testing? Large corporations and publishing companies. The ones who write the textbooks write the tests, and they're the ones benefiting. Now, you know, I've heard the arguments of why we should keep testing, and most of them are all benefits to the teacher and the school system, not the kids themselves. You know, we need to ask the question, is it helping the kids actually learn? But here's the main problem with the testing environment in general. We are assuming through this process that education should be one size fits all. We're assuming that all kids must learn exactly the same and be tested according to the same standard. How many of you have more than one child? Okay. So you're in the kitchen one morning and one of your children comes up to you, and you have to stop and think and scratch your head and be like, which kid is this? I mean, are you like, man, we're going to have to come up with a numbering system for the kids. I mean, does that happen? Well, you might call them by the wrong name sometimes, if you're anything like my mom. But likely you don't actually get them confused. Now, was that an accident on God's part? Was he like, oh man, I meant to make them all the same, but somehow they came out different? No, he loves diversity. He values diversity. He's created diversity, and yet we are just squashing the diversity through this testing process. Again, from Dr. David Elkin, the factory model of education hurries children because it ignores the individual differences in mental abilities and learning rates and learning styles. Children are pressured to meet uniform standards as measured by standardized tests. Those who cannot keep up in this system, as indicated by the test, are often regarded as defective vessels and are labeled learning disabled or ADHD. That's the cycle we're putting them through. It's not helping them learn. There's a great parable that illustrates this just all too beautifully. I did not write this, but this was so good. So for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. There's only one of them, exactly. Mr. Monkey over here, he's pretty happy, but I mean, what's this fish thinking? He's delayed, right? He must have a learning disability. And that's what we're telling them. You see, once upon a time, as the story goes, the animals decided they needed to do something to meet the demands of the new world. So they organized a school. They adopted an activity curriculum that consisted of 4 subjects. They had running, climbing, swimming, and flying. So to make it easier to administer all the subjects, all the animals took all the subjects. And they were all highly motivated. They wanted to learn, they wanted to get good grades, and so they each tried very hard. Well, the duck was excellent in swimming and flying. In fact, better than his instructor. But he lagged behind his classmates in running and climbing, so he had to stay after school and also drop swimming in order to practice those 2 subjects. Soon his webbed feet were badly worn from running, and now he was only average in swimming. At the start of the year, the squirrel was first in his class in climbing and running, and second only to the duck at flying. But he developed some serious frustration issues in the flying class because his teacher made him start from the ground up, and he wanted to start in the treetop and go down. He developed Charlie horses from overexertion and caught pneumonia in swimming class. And he missed so much school that he got a C in climbing and a D in running, the ones he was the best at to begin with. And to make matters worse, because the squirrel constantly squirmed and chattered in class and had difficulty paying attention, he was diagnosed with a learning disorder. The squirrel eventually was placed in remedial classes and had to be medicated in order to continue his schoolwork. The rabbit started at the top of his class in running, but had a nervous breakdown because of so much makeup work in swimming. The fox was a natural in his running class and scored well in climbing and in swimming, but became so frustrated at his inability to get good grades in flying that he began assaulting his classmates. He even tried to eat the duck. His behavior was so disruptive, he was expelled from school, he fell in with a rough crowd, and eventually wound up in a center for animal delinquents. Well, the eagle was a problem child and was disciplined severely. You see, in the climbing class, he beat all the others to the top of the tree, but he insisted on using his own way to get there. The elephant, meanwhile, developed low self-esteem because he couldn't do well in any of the subjects. When he sank into clinical depression, his therapist persuaded him to try a different school that focused on subjects such as lifting and carrying. But you see, lifting and carrying was not as prestigious as careers in flying and swimming and climbing and running. So the elephant always felt inferior, but he did manage to make a decent living and support his family. Well, at the end of the year, an abnormal eel that could swim exceedingly well and also run, climb, and fly just a little had the highest average and was valedictorian. The prairie dog stayed out of school and fought the tax levy because the administration would not add digging and burrowing to the curriculum. They apprenticed their children to a badger and later joined the groundhogs and gophers to start a successful private school. Now, I mean, we laugh at the crazy story, and obviously no such thing ever happened. But can you see the serious side in this? Can you see the applications to real life? Can you see how crazy it is to assume that all kids are just going to have to learn the same? It doesn't even make common sense. Let's have some more diversity and let's stop testing our kids so much. Point number 5, poor health and nutrition. We could spend so much time on this one, but let me just mention a couple of quick thoughts. We know that a good diet is very important to children. We know that what we eat has a profound impact upon the developing mind. For example, myelin, an essential component to brain development, is made up of essential fatty acids, particularly and almost only found in breast milk for infants. It's absolutely critical for brain development, and then a healthy diet after that helps with myelination also. There was a study done in New York of 1 million students. That's a huge participant study. 1 million students, and they took a group of them and took out any foods that had artificial flavors, preservatives, and dyes. Didn't really change the diet all that much, but they just took out those additives, and those students did 14% better on IQ tests. I mean, there is an incredible impact between what kids are eating and how well they're able to learn, how their brains are developing. We know that sugar impacts the developing brain and the process of myelination. We could go on with a lot of that, but let's just suffice it to say that the devil has been pretty successful in designing the diet of our youngsters, and he knows that he's attacking their minds in the process. Point number 6, age segregation. Age segregation. According to a recent article by Dr. Jay Fieldman and Peter Gray, the placement of children in separate classes with others of the same age is a fairly recent phenomenon. Age segregation did not occur in full force until the 1930s, when the advent of compulsory education laws brought a large influx of children to the public school system. Until then, the main source of formal education for most children was the one-room schoolhouse, which on average contained approximately 25 children ranging in age from 5 to 15. Anyone here gone to the one-room schoolhouse? All right, a few of you. That was, now, okay, let me clarify here. So what he's actually saying is this whole idea that we got to chop children up and segregate them by age came about as a result of a huge influx of children to the school system. We had to organize them somehow. And it's a logical conclusion. You can't blame them. How are you going to organize kids? Well, we just automatically group them by age. And he's saying that before that, though, we had the one-room schoolhouse, which had a wide range of ages. Now, the one-room schoolhouse, I would argue, isn't quite the ideal. God created families. That's the ideal in age integration. But we've seen some benefits with the one-room schoolhouse, though, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. The problem with chopping up kids by their same age is this. Never in history until the 20th century have young people been largely separated from the ongoing and productive activities of society. We have separated kids from what it means to be an adult. We've pulled them away from real life. They're not getting to interact with adulthood. And yet society's survival depends on raising new generations in close proximity with adults who are engaged in their central roles. Institutional age segregation creates a situation in which parents' productive work, indeed, major portions of their adult lives, are carried out in settings where there are no children. Children do not get to know a variety of adults and observe their lives. The question we need to ask ourselves is this, though. We want to be preparing children for real life. Is real life age segregated? No, it's not, right? Are we age segregated here right now? No, we're not. Real life is not age segregated. As Dan Greenberg, who founded the Sudbury Valley School, which is an age-integrated school that's doing very well, does such division take place naturally anywhere? In industry, do all 21-year-old laborers work separately from 20 years olds or 23-year-olds? In business, are there separate rooms for 30-year-old executives and 31-year-old executives? That's crazy, right? Where on earth was this idea conceived? Is anything more socially damaging than segregating children by year for 14 or often 18 years? Notice the word he uses here. I want to ask you, what's the number one reason given for age segregation as we see it? Socialization, exactly. Kids, you hear it all the time. Kids have to be with other kids for proper socialization. Dan Greenberg's saying, no. Not only is that not helping them, that's hurting them. It's damaging good social skills. I'll get to more of that in just a minute. Let's put another stepping stone in place here. The Russian developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky, he developed something known as the zone of proximal development. If you study psychology, you probably came across this one. Task that a child can accomplish only with some assistance and support. Most cognitive development takes place within this zone, and children develop primarily by attempting tasks they can accomplish only in collaboration with a more competent individual. All right, that's a bunch of complicated words. Let's see this from a simple example. Anyone here ever seen 2 3-year-olds playing a game of catch? You're laughing. What's that? They both want the ball, right? But if one of them throws it, this game of catch just isn't going to last, right? Neither one of them are coordinated enough to play a game. Now, suppose we have a 3-year-old, though, and a 10-year-old. Is a game of catch possible? Yes. It is, because that 10-year-old can carefully throw the ball into those outstretched arms of the 3-year-old, and when the 3-year-old makes a throw into left field, the 10-year-old runs over there and catches it. So the game of ball became within the zone of proximal development because it was that task that this child, this 3-year-old, could accomplish only with the assistance and support of the 10-year-old. And therefore the learning, the cognition, the development took place within this zone. And that's why children develop primarily by attempting tasks they can accomplish only in collaboration with a more competent individual. Now I've heard it argued though, well, that's what school is, collaboration with a more competent individual. No, that's not. That's instruction by a more competent individual. We need collaboration. Collaboration signifies a bit of a one-on-one interactive experience. That's the zone of proximal development here, and that is so powerful for learning. Researchers have found an age-integrated environment to be beneficial for academics. Children actually do better academically in age-integrated environments. They have better self-esteem. Now, we're not quite sure exactly why this is, but I have to imagine that it's linked to peers. Peers typically aren't that great for your self-esteem. So there's definitely some connection there. And get this one, socialization skills. Children in age-integrated, that's the opposite of segregating them by age-integrated environments actually have better socialization skills than those who grow up in an environment with primarily their own age mates. Better socialization skills. The results seem to show, this is Dr. Larry Shires, he's done extensive research on socialization. The results seem to show that a child's social development depends more on adult contact and less on contact with other children as previously thought. So he's saying, look, he's acknowledging the fact that we used to think it depended on child-child contact. You know, kids had to be with other kids. That's what you still hear. But in reality, that's a myth. He's saying, look, we used to think that. But now, as we see the research, as we see the results, we're understanding that's not the case anymore. We realize that kids need adult contact for proper socialization. Really, let's just think about this common sense here for a minute. Are we training our kids to stay kids or to become adults? You want them to become adults, right? You don't want them to stay kids forever. So, as I was talking actually with a friend of mine who's an educator, and he said, look, we're training our kids to become adults. He said, you don't learn how to be adults from other kids. You learn from other adults. And I had to stop and scratch my head. That just goes against every paradigm we know in society, but it's absolutely true. How are you going to learn to be a functioning adult in society? Well, you're going to have to interact with a functioning adult in society. You can't wait until you get to be an adult. You have to practice in early childhood. And again, this is Dr. Shires talking about this, but we could go into extensive research that shows very, very clearly that children who are in age-mixed environments, especially within the family, have far greater socialization skills. They have no problem talking to others outside of their age group. They can relate to others outside of their age group. Far better socialization with and again, don't take this to extremes. It's nothing wrong with kids playing together, but we're talking about teaching good socialization skills. They need adult contact. When you're little and just with kids your own age, the range of possible activities is restricted by the knowledge and abilities of those in your age group. But in collaboration with older kids, there's almost no limit to what you might do. It helps the learning process too. And as John Taylor Gatto put so well, a close study of what big people were up to was always the most exciting occupation of youth. Isn't that true? Isn't that the way it used to be? Yeah, you couldn't wait to go see what the big people were up to. And yet we've sort of lost that in this age-segregated, media-saturated culture that we have now. Children are compared to everyone else of the same age. They're not encouraged to rise to a higher thinking level because they're spending the majority of their lives with those who are, more or less, generalizing here, at the same level that they are when it comes to thinking skills. We're told in the book Education that cooperation should be the spirit of the schoolroom, the law of its life. Let the older assist the younger, the strong the weak, and so far as possible, let each be called upon to do something in which he excels. We need to be teaching our children unselfish service. How do they do that? By just interacting with kids their same age? No, they're going to learn unselfishness much better when there are those who are younger than they are that they need to help, or the elderly that they have to go help. That's how we're teaching them good socialization and the spirit of unselfish service. Now, this doesn't just extend to the classroom, though. Have you ever thought that the way we function in our Sabbath schools is very age segregated? I never thought about that much until watching this documentary called Divided. Anyone seen this one? No one. Wow, I think I have enough copies for everybody here. This was a powerful look. Now this is within Sunday schools. It's Baptist produced, I believe, from the National Center for Age Integrated Churches. But they took a hard look. They started out with, why are our youth leaving the church? 80% of our youth leaving the church. What's going on? And they looked through the scripture and they looked at the model we have for parents mentoring their children. They realized this isn't happening. We have youth mentoring youth. Where's the spiritual connection there to help our children grow to be spiritually strong through their mentors? Powerful documentary. I watched it. I had to watch it again. Fascinating. Excellent, biblical, highly recommend this. I'll have copies for sale after Sabbath this evening. Or you could also get it on my website if you need to take off. Point number 7, television and electronics. Now this is a big one. Every time I talk about thinking skills, somebody always names this one. It's the TV, that's what's damaging. Well, true, it is a major factor. It's not the only one, as we've seen, but it is a major factor. Now, a lot of attention has been given to the dangers of bad content in media. I think sort of intuitively, though, we know that we want to shy away from bad content. Most Christian parents are not going to put their child in front of terrible content. That's common sense. But what about good content media? What about media in general? How's it affecting children? I lost my train of thought. I was going to mention something and I forgot. Okay, I'll move on. So, don't move on. It'll come back. I remember what it was. Okay, so they say that with watching entertainment television, it takes about 30 seconds for the frontal lobe to completely shut off. Any fast-paced material, that it tricks your brain and it shuts off the decision-making area of your brain. And you now start receiving whatever you're getting as absolute truth because it's bypassed your filters. So even some of what we consider good content media would have to go just by that definition because much stuff out there you kind of feel like you need to filter, and that's hard to do, especially for children. But let's concentrate just on media in general. Let's set the whole content discussion aside. The first point I'll mention is that television electronics are damaging because they're starving children of essential brain development. So they need real life active involvement, and yet we're starving them of that important time by allowing the interaction with a more sedate form of entertainment. Dr. Healy again. Much early development of physical and mental skills and their foundations in the brain comes from experimenting and solving problems with what kind of materials? Real world materials. The long-term outcomes of forcing children's attention unnaturally may have even more serious implications than we have realized. She mentions forcing their attention. It's forcing them to pay attention. Keep that thought in your mind. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But let's look. She has a list here, actually, of 8 problems with television and electronics. Now, this book was written about 10 years ago, I think, maybe 15 years ago, I'm not sure. And it was particularly focused on television, because that was the big thing there then. We now realize, though, this applies even more to interactive forms of media. It's typically said that, well, you know, we know that TV is bad, and a lot of parents say, oh, I got rid of the TV. Well, good, I'm glad you did. But we're replacing it with, you know, the iPad, and what they find is that that's actually worse than TV. I was reading a research article by, I believe she's a pediatric psychiatrist, and she'd spent years treating children for various disorders and problems they were having. And she said, across the board, for as long as I've been treating them, I would remove all forms of electronics. That was just part and parcel of my treatment process. And typically my treatments wouldn't work if they didn't follow the rules about removing electronics. She said, though, I've realized that now with the new forms of texting and gaming and all this stuff that's coming in, she says now I can remove television and leave those other things in and the treatment will work. She said I can remove all the other interactive and supposedly good forms of media, though, and leave television, and my treatment will work. And she came to the conclusion that the interactiveness, the very interactiveness of the screens is actually more damaging than passively viewing television because it's overstimulating the mind. More on that at another time, but let's briefly run through a list here. Overstimulates children and creates passive withdrawal. There's the frontal lobe shutting off, the brain areas not making decisions very well anymore, causing attention and listening problems. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that media in general is causing ADHD and ADD and many of the other attention problems. It emphasizes skills which do not transfer well to reading and listening and requires less mental effort than reading. I mean, you tell me, what's easier, watching TV or studying your Bible? Watching TV, right? Easier. I mean, that's natural to us. So this is kind of saying, you know, I mean, it's like the analogy, if you feed your child cake all the time, pretty soon they're not going to like broccoli, right? So if you're feeding them this easy diet of television and electronics all the time, pretty soon they're not going to like to read and to study. It shortens the time children are willing to spend on finding an answer to intellectual problems they are set to solve. It's decreasing problem-solving abilities. It artificially manipulates the brain into paying attention. Here we're coming back to this idea of forcing their attention. Forcing them to pay attention by violating certain of its natural defenses with frequent visual and auditory changes. This is known as saliency. Let's unpack this whole idea of saliency for just a minute. Sudden close-ups, pans, and zooms are effective in alerting the brain because they violate its reflex need to maintain a predictable personal space. Salient features such as bright colors, quick movements, or sudden noises get attention fast, since brains are programmed to be extremely sensitive to such changes that might signal danger. We're hardwired this way. You know, and okay, look at this list. You may be saying, well, I don't watch bad TV. Well, okay, sudden close-ups, pans, zooms, bright colors, quick movements, sudden noises. It's 95% of even good content media functions this way. It's designed this way. I have a bit of a background in film production myself, and you do this on purpose to hold the viewer's attention. I mean, this is just how it works. It's designed to get your attention because brains are programmed to be sensitive to such changes because it might signal danger. In a sense, these carefully planned manipulations separate the natural responses of brain and body. The viewer's attention is alerted, but there's no need for physical action. Okay, let's use a simple example. Suppose you're in Africa and you're going on a safari. So off you go into the African savanna. And you're enjoying the view, you're enjoying all the wildlife you're seeing. Things slow down a bit though, and you decide you need to get out and stretch your legs and take a walk. So you hop out, and you're strolling along through the African savanna. And look, oh, the giraffes over there, and there's elephants over there, and the antelope, and the beautiful views, and oh, you're just enjoying this. And then a movement catches your attention. You're hardwired this way, right? God designed us to do this. And so you look, and as you're looking, a lion steps out of the bushes. And he's looking right at you. Lunch, right? And he crouches. And you see that classic feline tail twitch. And then he roars. What are you going to do about it? Run. Right. Seminar I did a while ago, somebody said, I'd take a selfie. No, you'd run. You'd get out of there fast. You'd get back to that safari vehicle, right? And you hope you can run faster than that lion. That's the natural response of brain and body. Your brain says, that's scary. We're programmed to things that catch our attention like that, and you're going to do something about it. Okay, but suppose you're sitting there watching TV or interacting with your iPad or whatever it is, and something might not actually be scary, but your brain says it is. Remember, it's triggering the brain into that danger response, even if you don't actually see it that way, and yet you sit there doing absolutely nothing. And so you've disconnected the natural response of brain and body. It's damaging to adults, yes, but it's particularly damaging to children because they're trying to figure out the world around them, and we're just bombarding them with this confused state of affairs where this is scary, do something, but you're not actually doing anything about it. It induces neural passivity. That's scary right there. Neural, referring to nerves in your brain, neurons. Passivity, absolutely doing nothing, induces neural passivity and reduces the brain's ability to remain actively focused on a task. And lastly, has a hypnotic and possibly neurologically addictive. Now, she says possibly neurologically addictive. This is 10 years old. We know beyond the shadow of a doubt it is neurologically addictive now. The Diagnostics and Statistics Manual is adding a category, a new category now for tech addictions. It is addicting just as much as drugs and alcohol and anything else. It has an effect on the brain that changes the frequency of its electrical impulses in ways that block active mental processing. Let's just understand this for just a moment. Somebody tell me, what does hypnotic mean? How would you define hypnosis? Letting someone else take control of you. That is an excellent definition. You reach a state where somebody else can feed you information and take control of your mind without you having any control. Do you want to reach that state? No, I want to be in control of my mind. Do you think film producers and media producers know how to hypnotize you? Absolutely. It's in the research. We know it's hypnotic, and we don't want them taking control of our minds. But then, addictive. Somebody, if you were to tell me about your friend, and you said, yeah, they're addicted to such and such, how would you know that? What would be your definition? Can't do anything else. All right. What else? Do it in place of other things. Good. 2 good definitions there. What else? Somebody. How about you can't get enough of it? Always want more. You can't stop. There are many definitions there we could give, but we're actually finding now it is a medically treatable addiction now, as young as 4 years old at times. Scary stuff. We need to be very, very careful. And again, it's not just television. It is media in general. The problem is that the research is typically very slow in coming. You know, we used to recommend, the American Academy of Pediatrics, still their standard recommendation is keep screens away from kids until 3. But then recent research came out and they said, actually you want to keep it away from kids until they reach the age of 7. And then they changed it and said age 8. And then a new research came out and said, well, actually, if we want to really follow in line with brain development, you'll be keeping all technology away from kids until they reach the age of 12. And I mean, it's going to be adulthood at the rate they're going. You know, the point is, the more we study it, the more damaging we find it is. Rarely, if ever, do we find, actually, never do we find a benefit that's without side effects. Yes, we find benefits of technology, but we've yet to find a benefit that doesn't have its associated side effect. Damaging stuff, we need to be very, very careful. They've done so many studies. They've done studies on even adults who read things off of the screen versus the printed page. Those reading off of a page have greater reading comprehension and retention than those who are reading it off of the screen. So we love our Bible apps, but when possible, read it off the actual page. And of course, I know what you're thinking, moms. I hear it all the time. Come on, you just took away my best babysitter. Nothing holds my child's attention like my iPad. You know what? You're absolutely right. Nothing holds your child's attention like your iPad. It's designed to do that. It shouldn't surprise you that it's capturing their attention. That's normal. But you need to be asking yourselves whether it's a good babysitter. You know, sending them outside, having them do stuff with you, rather than trying to send them off and just mind their own business and keep out of your hair, you know. It may be a babysitter, but not a good one. I see it traveling so much. You see a kid that's just screaming and carrying on. The mom hands the kid the phone, and they're just totally sedate. You know, it's hypnotic. It's designed to hold their attention, but it's not good for the little brains. And what about educational media? Well, let's suffice it to say that Steve Jobs, who created the iPad and touted its supposed educational benefits, did not let his children have iPads. Most of the big-name CEOs in the Silicon Valley send their kids to tech-free schools. We read earlier, the more quiet and simple the life of the child. This whole media environment is not quiet and simple. It's not helping them learn. Another great documentary I have more of this evening, Captivated. This looks at the effects of media. Powerful, powerful stuff. Excellent as it encourages families to take a step back and consider how media has impacted their lives. And coming very soon in the process of production, iChild. This will be a 3-part series that I'm putting together on how media is affecting children specifically. We have a lot of stuff on the content. We have a lot of stuff on media in general for youth and adults. Where's the stuff for children? The research is there, but nobody's bringing it out because the tech industries don't like it when we bring out this kind of research. So I aim to have this out by, I keep saying the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. But it's on pre-order. Point number 8. Let's touch on a couple of these quickly. An education chiefly of the mind. An education which is just focusing on mental culture. We need a balanced education encompassing the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, because good thinking skills require the whole brain. Every area of your brain needs to be used for good thinking. The problem is if you're just working this one area of the brain all the time through academic study, you're allowing the other areas to get weaker. You know, it's like, suppose I wanted to start working out and I wanted to get bigger arm muscles. And so I go to the gym and every single day I'm lifting weights. But here's the thing. On my way to the gym for the first day, I said, you know what? I'm very right-hand dominant. Why do I need to work my left arm so much? It's strong enough as is. And so I decided to put that one in my pocket and just lift weights with my right arm. 2 months goes by, I'm lifting weights with my right arm only, keeping this arm in my pocket. What's the situation going to look like? Imbalanced, yeah. And what's going to happen to my left arm? I heard it. Atrophy, right. The left arm's going to get weaker, and I'm going to be imbalanced. Same idea with the brain. If we're just working the one area of the brain through schooling all the time, nothing wrong with schooling, right? I mean, we need that. That's an important element. Don't take me wrong here. But if that's all we're doing, we're allowing the other areas of the brain to get weaker, and we're not encouraging whole brain activity. An education derived chiefly from books. Books are good, but if that's the only place we're getting it, if it's chiefly from books, it leads to superficial thinking. Practical work encourages close observation and independent thought. That's our goal here, independent thinkers. Rightly performed, it tends to develop that practical wisdom which we call common sense, all too uncommon now. It develops the ability to plan and execute, strengthens courage and perseverance, and calls for the exercise of tact and skill. Very important area of education. Point number 9, a lack of training to think. And so we've looked at 8 tactics that are damaging thinking skills, but we also just need to realize that children need to be encouraged to develop some thinking skills.